6 of 10 videos have dropped and it's only getting scarier, folks. My name is The Brand. This is Pro Wrestling Planet. We've got 40 more names to go. If you're just joining us in the journey now, we've been through 60 names already. I suggest checking out those videos on the channel. I'll also try to link to them down here somewhere as well. In the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and jump right back into it. You can check out the rest of this list and all of our other lists here by subscribing. I'm also legally required to tell you to hit the bell notifications as well. Let's get back into the countdown. Number 40, Abaddon. There's not much really known about this person. We know they started wrestling around 2019, and we do know that was trained at the Rocky Mountain Pro Academy. Most of this person from their appearances on AEW Wrestling, and while they have been sporadic, just one look at these graphic images here tells you all you need to know about Abaddon and how scary they are. Number 39, Rosemary. Holly Letkeman was born in 1983. She's Canadian. I don't think we should hold that against her, but she began training for wrestling in 2007. A lot of people may know her from Shimmer and around the 2010s. More than likely, though, even more people know her from her time with Impact Wrestling as Rosemary. She was a part of the Decay group, which we discussed with Crazy Steve earlier. They brought her back through Impact a few times, and since this is her most notable gimmick, this is pretty much what she uses from what I understand, and she's still active today. Still out there scaring people. She wasn't like the other girls. Number 38, Vampiro. Vampiro was born Ian Hodgkinson in 1967. His wiki page says that he was a bodyguard for Milli Vanilli before wrestling, but I don't see how that can be true. The timeline of that seems bizarre because it says he started wrestling in 1984, and Milli Vanilli was more of like a late 80s, early 90s type thing. Claims he was trained by Abdullah the Butcher a little bit, so there's that. He was a Canadian guy who, after about 6 years, ventured down to Mexico, and that's where he really started to make his name. It's where he really started scaring people. Being such an intriguing character in Mexico got him some work in Japan, and eventually in 1998, he landed a gig with WCW, which is where most people know him from, although you may have seen him pop up in other places like Wrestling Society X, Lucha Underground, Juggalo Wrestling. I mean, come on, who hasn't seen Juggalo Wrestling, dude? Currently doing stuff with the NWA, and as of press time, has not officially retired as of yet. You go, Vampiro, you go, boy. Number 37, Nails. Born Kevin Wackles in 1958. I mean, come on, the guy's name is Wackles. I mean, come on. Started doing wrestling in about 1982 and 1985. We first saw him in World Class. He did stuff with the AWA in Japan in the early part of his career. From there, he had several on-again, off-again stints with the World Wrestling Federation, including this infamous stint in 1991 as Nails, who was basically an escaped convict. I mean, who hasn't thought about something like this a time or two, right? Some kind of just crazed, escaped prisoner just out, just like hurting people. I swear this is the basis of like 3 horror movies at least already. The on-screen character, scary enough. Perhaps the man off-screen was even scarier. We know Nails mostly for the infamous story about how he choked Vince McMahon during a contract negotiation. I mean, Vince had strong-armed a lot of boardrooms at that point, but he wasn't quite prepared for that one, wouldn't you think? So he gets in right here on the list at number 37 per special request of Vince McMahon himself. Of course, he never returned to the WWE ever again, but he would pop up sporadically for WCW over the years, and there's some weird cameos there. Number 36, Sue Young. Born Vanera Riggs in 1989, she began wrestling in 2007, got signed to WWE Developmental in 2010. That time was very brief, only lasting a year or so. From there, she hit the independent scene very hard. You follow places like Shimmer, Shine. Her first one one-off appearance with TNA was back in 2015, but then in 2018, she became a regular there as well. You've seen her most recently in TNA wrestling as well, although she is currently temporarily inactive. Number 35, Wrath. Brian Clark was born in 1964, and we first saw him appear in the AWA as the Night Stalker in 1989. After AWA folded, he would do a few appearances for WCW, as well as UWF and Smoky Mountain, before his first most famous character kicked in the WWE, which was Adam Bomb. After doing that for a few years, he eventually ended up back in the WCW land. This time he was called upon to be Wrath, which was a member of a little stable with Mortis and James Vandenberg, who of course would feud with WCW's version of Sub-Zero, a man by the name of Glacier. To get all that, after the team broke up, he had a pretty nice little run as a singles guy all on his own, just kind of destroying people, and he was thought to be a credible opponent for Goldberg for a minute. He would later go on to do Chronic with Bryan Adams in WCW. Wrath was probably him at his most scariest. We can lump his other two gimmicks in here as well, as far as the Night Stalker and Adam Bomb. Speaking of his group, number 34, Mortis. Christopher Klousaridis. I probably totally botched that one. Born in 1970, he started wrestling in 1992, bounced around for a couple years, did a bunch of enhancement stuff with WWE in around 94, and then in 95, WCW gave him a shot on the undercard, and I'm talking the undercard. This all, of course, was as Chris Kanyon, but arguably his most famous gimmick here is when they brought him in as Mortis in 1996 to oppose Sub-Zero, Glacier, in WCW's real-life Mortal Kombat. The mask, the stoicism involved, and just the overall presentation of the group, I think made him stand out as a very scary character that they really could have done more with. WCW, of course. And after James Mitchell left, the whole thing was dropped. Wrath kept being Wrath, but Mortis would be put on the sidelines until they just reintroduced him later as just Chris Kanyon, which is who he would remain for the rest of his career. We sadly lost him in 2010 at the age of 40. Number 33, Sabu. Harry Brunk was born in 1964. That is his real name, by the way. You know him as Sabu, and he first began wrestling in 1985, believe it or not. This guy was a very special indie attraction for the first 6 years of his career. You could say his first big break was in the USWA as Samu in 1991. Shortly after that, in 93, WWE took a look at him a few times, but ultimately decided to pass. From there, he went and did stuff in FMW. He was concurrently working in Japan for FMW at the time as well. And you could say that this is where Sabu really started to develop his suicidal, homicidal, genocidal style. He was then brought into ECW, where he definitely made an impression, enough so to where the WCW used him a few times. Ultimately, though, he would pretty much land and stay with ECW around the 1995 year, and this is where his legend really grew and his brand really took on an audience. What makes Sabu scary is his intimidating presence, scars all over his body, and the fact that when you were in the ring with him, you legitimately never knew what he was capable of. That reputation succeeded him so much that I think it maybe prevented him from really being trusted by the big promotions in those days. Even when he was brought into WWE with their relaunch of ECW in the mid-2000s, he was still a wild card even then. Basically, the acorn doesn't fall very far from the tree because number 32, the original Chic. This just kind of seemed like one of those things where a lot of the Sabu persona comes from, so why wouldn't he be ranked just a spot above Sabu, you know what I mean? I'm not going to pretend like I spent my whole lifetime watching the guy's work. In fact, he was quite before my time. A lot of people probably know him from his time working for Vince Sr. or his time in Japan. Probably his two most famous runs that he had. Born in 1926 as Edward Farhat. By far, probably the oldest person on this list. We did lose him in 2003 at the age of 76. Number 31, Luna Vashon. Gertrude Vashon was born in 1962. She first started wrestling in 1985, but more than likely you know her from her WWE run, which started right around 1993. The look, the actions, the family tree, that for starters right there. And I think we can all agree pretty much the measuring stick for scary women wrestlers in general. I believe this is the highest you're going to see one of them on this list. And the female delegation has been represented quite well here on the 100 Scariest Wrestlers list. We try not to discriminate here. She also did a little WCW stuff, and then she found her way back to the WWE. She had her last match in 2007, and we sadly lost her in 2010. If I had a nickel for every time that I've said we've sadly lost this person on this list, man, I'd have a scary amount of nickels. That does it for this installment, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. There's only 30 more to go. Just breathe. We can do this. We can do this, people. Please join me on the journey. We're gonna pop some champagne when it's all said and done, and I want you to be here with me. The only way to do that is to go ahead and subscribe to the channel and get those notifications turned on. Also, please check out the rest of the videos in the list. If you haven't already, of course. Make sure to leave a like on your way out. We'll see you next time right here on Pro Wrestling Planet.